Hey guys, unfortunately I am back with another video. Painting is hard. Painting interesting colors is even harder. In this video I'm going to show you how to make your mini shading and highlights look dynamic with a technique you may already be using and just haven't noticed. You're watching Apollo Geist. So this is going to be some baby diaper shit, but for the sake of clarity I do want to touch upon what highlights and shadows actually are. A highlight occurs on a surface where a source of light, typically the sun, is at its strongest. That highlight diffuses and weakens along the surface, forming what we generally understand as the midtone. The shadow, or shading, occurs where the rays of light are blocked, or, failing that, least able to reach. It's important to note that, except in extreme cases, this doesn't mean no light is there. Even at nighttime, in what we understand as darkness, light is still everywhere from the moon and stars. It's simply less than in the day. I'm mentioning this now as it'll come back later. From a young age, we are taught, either implicitly or explicitly, that a highlight is done by taking the midtone and making it lighter, and that a shadow is done by making it darker. This isn't technically wrong, but it's an oversimplification of how they actually look in practice. We don't live inside a source engine test map where the sky and ground are the same color. A red shadow doesn't have to be a dark red, and a purple highlight doesn't have to be a light purple. There's a term for this approach to highlights and shading from the online spriting community, and it's a term I'm really surprised isn't used more elsewhere. They call it hue shifting. Hue shifting works like this. When applying a shadow or a highlight to an object, change the hue of that color as well as the tone. This can be as subtle or as extreme as you want it to be. For example, take yellow, and instead of simply doing lighter and darker yellow on both ends, we shift the hue towards orange. This is a pretty safe, easy way to warmly add definition to a yellow. But if we take it even further into a purplish color, for example, it still looks yellow, but now has a colder quality to it. To be clear here, hue shifting is not some hidden secret that's eluded mini painters. To the contrary, most mini painters eventually add the technique to their repertoire. But the thing I notice is, nobody seems to actually talk about it. This practice is shown a lot like it's this self-evident thing when I don't think it is. I want to demystify it and show you how it works. Let's look at this lovely impressionist style artwork Akimon did for Turn A Gundam, because who gives a fuck about art study if it isn't connected to my extremely narrow nerd interests? In this piece, we see the characters standing in the foreground during what appears to be the morning, and you'll notice a purple hue cast over most of their figures. They aren't wearing purple, but the hue dominates their silhouettes. Remember what I said about darkness not being entirely devoid of light? There's simply less of it, and light in shadows still bounces and reflects itself. The purple simply conveys that the group are standing somewhere the sun hasn't totally hit them, and therefore the surface reflects its cold color back onto them. Now look at the top of their heads. That's straight yellow, baby, conveying that warm, rising sun. Note how the hue shifting goes into opposite temperatures here, one cold and another warm. This is obviously a stylized artistic piece, but it does a good job of conveying how light actually behaves in real life. And like I said before, a lot of you guys already do this and just don't realize it. The mini painting meta for highlighting red is to use orange instead of pink. That is a form of hue shifting. Once you notice these habits and why they happen, you can push them to achieve more interesting results. Anyway, I can hear you guys now, just paint the goddamn mini Geist. So to show you all of this in practice, we'll do some examples using these joint smoking lizards. I'm gonna run through a few colors and then we'll tie it together into a proper mini at the end. Starting first with blue, we're gonna shift the hue to a bluish purple for the shadows. It's not too crazy, and we'll show you it doesn't take much of a shift in order to make things look interesting. For the highlights, we're actually going to shift into a sort of pastel pale green. Note that you can do the same hue shift for both ends. I could have highlighted with a purple as well, but having varied temperatures between tones implies a dynamic environment. And if you're a novice here and wondering, yes, you can absolutely do this with washes and dry brushing. I'm just painting the shadows and highlights on manually here for illustrative purposes. Yellow is next, and for the shadows we'll be shifting into a greenish color. For the highlights, we're gonna hit it with a bit of a pale peach skin tone. This is a bit more extreme, but again, it still scans as yellow. Next, we have green as the base color here, and I wanted to show hue shifting with something not quite as vibrant. We're shading with brown. This is going to give the green a warmer, earthier tone. This isn't as extreme of a shift as it seems. Keep in mind, brown is just yellow toned down. Unlike the others, this adds a more grounded look to the mini, and sometimes that's what you want. Like before, I highlighted with a peach color. For red, we're really pushing it here. We're using a dark turquoise, a color completely alien to our understanding of red. Now, this is a pretty bold color contrast, so we're gonna counter it with something warmer. In this case, an orange. This one and the next might be a bit controversial. Let's do one last weird one with pink. I'm laying down blue shadows. At first, it scanned simply as purple, which is still hue shifting, but I wanted a blue, so I kept going until I got there. Then for the highlights, I'm doing an ice yellow. This might actually be my favorite out of the batch. The camera probably won't pick it up, but in areas where the ice yellow and blue glazes met, they mixed a little and formed this kind of pale green, and those little glimmers of green on the model look dope. I could keep going with these examples, but hopefully I've made my point here. Previously, we were operating in pretty simple mid-tone shadow highlight steps, but mini painting often involves many separate layers of highlighting and shading. And with hue shifting, you can shift between each of those numerous layers. So let's do something a lot bigger and complex. This is an Aeorian nullifier from the Critical Role WizKids line. I bought it years ago, and frankly, I'm never going to use it, so I decided this would be a perfect test dummy. The color scheme I'll be doing is based on a sprite from a hue shifting tutorial by Blue Canary, whose guide I recommend checking out. It's another really good explanation of the practice. Link in description. I start by painting the model in a very dark desaturated purple. I'm painting darkest to lightest here. Then I apply a green midtone, glazing it over most of the musculature to ensure a smooth blend. Then I shift to a pastel green, with successive color covering less and less and focusing on the top. I go to a sky blue, then a lilac, and finally a pale pink on the edges. Here's the end result, and yeah, I like it. Some of the colors definitely got a bit lost in the process, but depending on who you ask, this is a good thing when it comes to transitions. This is not going to be to everyone's tastes, and that's perfectly fine. Sometimes you want the shading and highlights to be the same hue. But I also know that there are people out there who either don't know about this technique, or they've noticed it but struggle to put it into words when asking about it. Naming phenomena makes them easier to understand, and importantly, seek guidance on. I also believe artist communities have a lot to learn from each other, and we should observe their own habits for better insight on ours. So yeah, I'm no color theory expert, and this video is not comprehensive. I just hope this inspires newcomers to futz around with some colors. Throw an odd-colored wash onto that goblin, use a contrasting color as a shadow, live a little, man. They're your minis, have fun with them. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, let me know in the comments. If you hated this video, man, I guess you'll just have to tell me why in the comments and share it everywhere saying how wrong I am, like on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Know Your Meme, jollygreengiant.com, petboys.com.